Okay, quick question. Why can't you stop watching just one more episode at 1 in the morning when you have work in 6 hours? Genuinely, why? Hold that thought, because by the end of this video, I'm going to answer that question using cavemen. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. Somewhere deep in a cave, tens of thousands of years ago, a bunch of exhausted, hungry, slightly smelly humans sat around a fire and did something that had nothing to do with hunting or gathering or fixing anything at all. They stopped and told each other stories. And if you think about it, that's kind of beautiful, honestly. These people had every reason to just collapse and sleep. No fridge, no comfort, a hard day behind them, and a harder one ahead. And yet night after night, they chose to sit down and drift somewhere else entirely inside their own heads together. So what were they actually chasing? What was it about sitting in the dark, listening to made-up moments that felt worth staying awake for? That's the real mystery here. And honestly, the answer explains a lot about why you're still awake right now, scrolling instead of sleeping. Picture it properly. It's dark outside the cave. Genuinely dangerous dark. The kind of dark where something with teeth is definitely out there somewhere. Inside, it's warm. There's food in stomachs for once, and someone, probably the one guy who always talks too much, clears his throat and says, "So, let me tell you what happened to me today." And just like that, everyone leans in, not because they need to, because they want to. That's the part that always gets me. In a world with zero entertainment options, a story was basically the original Friday night plan. And honestly, every group had that one guy. You know the one. Slightly overdramatic, always adds, and then out of nowhere to every sentence. Somebody in that circle 10,000 years ago was absolutely exaggerating the size of that animal, and everyone let him, because it made the story better, and it wasn't really about danger or lessons. That guy telling his story about the strange shape he saw near the river bend, everyone listening wasn't bracing for survival. They were somewhere else, completely picturing it, feeling it, living a version of a moment they never actually experienced themselves. Which, when you actually sit with it, is a strange kind of magic. One person speaks, and suddenly a dozen minds are picturing the exact same imaginary river, the exact same shadow. For a few minutes, everyone in that circle was quietly living inside the same little world together. It's honestly the same pull your group chat has on you today. Someone starts typing out a wild, detailed story, and you're not reading it for a lesson. You're reading it because it feels good to disappear into someone else's moment for a minute. And it wasn't just excitement either. Someone tells a genuinely embarrassing story about themselves, and the whole circle bursts out laughing, the exact same way your group chat loses it over a bad selfie today. Someone tells a sad one about a person they lost, and suddenly it goes quiet. Everyone just sitting with it. Sound familiar? That's basically you at midnight laughing at one video, then immediately crying at the next one, which is honestly a little funny if you think about it. Somewhere a caveman heard a joke and did that exact same helpless wheezing laugh you do at 2 a.m. Somewhere someone told a story, so sad grown adults with spears just sat there quietly wrecked. Our emotional settings really haven't changed. We just upgraded the screen, and that right there is closer to the real reason stories exist. Not warning, not information, comfort. A kind of quiet, shared peace that comes from imagining something together, instead of just sitting alone with your own tired thoughts. But let's be real for a second. Nobody was sitting there thinking, yes, valuable survival data. They were leaning in because it felt good. A good story does something to your body. Your heart speeds up a little. You forget you're tired. For a few minutes, you're not sitting in a cold, dark cave anymore. You're somewhere else, entirely living someone else's moment. And that's genuinely wild to think about. Ancient humans with nothing, no games, no music you could carry around, no screens, still found a way to mentally leave their own exhausting lives for 10 minutes at a time. A story wasn't just useful. It was the original vacation. But survival tips alone don't explain why people cry during movies, or why your group still quotes that one show from 3 years ago. There's something else going on here, something a little more personal. Because once that story ended, and someone else jumped in with their own version, or added a wild detail that was probably exaggerated, something quietly shifted in that circle. They weren't just a group of people anymore. They were a group of people who now shared the same memory. And in a world with no phones, no group chats, no photos, a shared story was basically the only thing holding a tribe together between one crisis and the next. It was memory glue and group therapy all wrapped into one guy talking too much by a fire. And honestly, I think we underrate this part. Everyone has that one friend who tells even a boring Tuesday like it's an action movie. That wasn't an accident either. That's an ancient, deeply loved skill. Still doing exactly what it always did, making people want to lean in and stay a little longer. Here's the part that actually surprised me though. The best storytellers, the ones everyone wanted to sit next to, probably weren't the strongest hunters or the toughest fighters. They were just good at making people feel something. And somehow, that alone made them some of the most cherished people in the entire group. Let that sink in for a second. In a world built entirely around hard physical effort, being able to quietly hand someone else a little piece for a few minutes was its own kind of gift. Storytelling wasn't a break from real life. It was one of the only breaks they had. And here's a fun little side effect nobody planned for. A really good story doesn't let you leave in the middle. Someone starts describing the moment, right before the danger hit, and the whole circle goes completely silent, leaning forward, desperate to know what happens next. And here's a thought that genuinely made me laugh when it hit me. Some of those cave fire stories weren't even new. They were about grandparents, great-grandparents, people who lived and died long before anyone in that circle was even born. Which means, somewhere a group of ancient humans sat by a fire completely hooked, listening to stories about even more ancient humans, which honestly is exactly what you're doing right now. You watching a video about ancient people who themselves sat around listening to stories about even older ancient people. It's History Channel's all the way down. They were you. You're just the newest rerun. Sound familiar? That exact feeling, the one keeping you glued to a screen at 1 in the morning, refusing to sleep until you know how the episode ends, is not a modern invention. It's an ancient hunger for that same quiet peace tens of thousands of years before Netflix existed. Our brains never really learned to separate real memory from a story imagined vividly enough. To your brain, a good enough story feels almost like it's actually happening to you, which is exactly why it can make you feel calm or moved or completely somewhere else, even though you never left the room. And that craving just never went away. It's still running the exact same quiet pull thousands of generations later, except now it's aimed at true crime podcasts at 2 a.m. instead of a voice by a fire. Which honestly means somewhere your brain still treats a good story like a small private escape hatch, not a survival need. Just somewhere quieter to be for a little while. Also probably still expects popcorn. That part never fully evolved either. So back to that question from the very beginning. Why can't you stop watching at 1 in the morning, even when you know better? Because deep down, some ancient part of your brain still remembers what it felt like to sit somewhere warm and quietly borrow someone else's world for a little while. That's not a flaw. That's the same instinct that built your entire group chat every movie night, every bedtime story. And yes, that show you're definitely still going to finish tonight. So the next time someone tells a story so good, you completely forget the time. Remember, you're not being lazy or easily distracted. You're feeling something ancient and honestly, quite lovely. The same quiet peace your ancestors felt thousands of years before anyone thought to press play. Want to know why ancient humans were obsessed with gossip next? Drop a comment below and I'll cover it in the next video.